Hi, this week's conversation was on what spiritual community means to you. Now, that was the topic I gave, but what really came out of it is more about how we fit into spiritual community and the ways in which we navigate in spiritual community. And that turned out to be a very rich conversation. Most everybody, when they spoke about what spiritual community meant to them, had a different take on it. There were certain features that were the same for everybody, such as tribe, that you felt got by them, that you were seen, that you felt loved, that you felt at home, that you felt connection. And so that was pretty general, and I'm sure you feel the same when you think of spiritual community, but also feel that little bit of difference, because some felt that it was a place where they would rise up to be their spiritual best. Others just saw it as a place where they were accepted fully for who they were. And one of the things that came out was that, particularly in the New Thought community and around Science of Mind churches, sometimes the question, because we are so much about being the creator of our lives and being responsible for what it is we create in our lives, that sometimes people, when you come in and not feeling at your highest or best, are asked the question, well, how did you create that? And that is full of judgment, doesn't have a lot of acceptance, and doesn't feel very loving. So even though it is true that we do create our lives, it is also true that when we come together in spiritual community, it needs to be about compassion, kindness, and acceptance. It needs to feel like home. It needs to feel like you belong, whether you're at your best or not. And so it may be true that you're supported there to be your best, but it's also a place you come to for comfort when you're not feeling at your best. And I think that's a really important feature of spiritual community that's important for you when you're looking about how you fit in. One person who shared talked about how she got burnt out in spiritual community and left for a while because she had to rebuild herself up, replenish herself, refine herself. And I think a lot of what happens in spiritual community is, if you are a person who gives a lot, then people have come to you and you're the one that they want to get that from. And so if you're somebody who's a real giver, it's important to remember that nurturing has to have a reciprocal sense to it. Even in spiritual community, it's not about just we come to give. It's also not about what we can just come to get. The nurturing has to be what I call threefold, which is, we here at the center, at our virtual center, I ask 3 questions of everyone to make sure that they're balanced in their nurturing. The first being, what did you do to nurture somebody else? And that's usually pretty easy for folks to answer. The second one is what did you do to nurture yourself? Now that could be a little tougher. And the third one is what did you do to allow someone else to nurture you? Because in spiritual community, you want to experience all 3 of those things. The other thing we spoke about was something we speak a lot about at our center, which has to do with the knowing, that inner knowing of when you get that full being yes, when you just know that something is yours to do. And it comes out of that question, is this mine to do? And so when somebody comes to you in spiritual community and says, will you do this? It's really important to be good with yourself around getting quiet enough to ask, is this mine to do? And if it's not, don't do it. Now, you're not waiting for a no. You simply either get that full being yes or you don't. You don't have to be confused, because if you're confused, it's not a yes. You don't have to wait for a no if you're not getting the yes. It's just, if it's not yes, say no. it's not yours to do. Now, maybe 5 minutes later, it will be yours to do. But in that moment, when you're asking yourself, if you don't get that yes, it is not yours to do. And balance in spiritual community is incredibly important because we can easily burn ourselves out. The other thing about spiritual community had to do that we spoke about was leadership, and how leadership people sometimes step up into leadership who don't actually have the spiritual maturity to be that leader. Some folks want to be leaders because they like control. Some folks want to be leaders because they want to feel like the minister, they want to get kudos from the minister or from the other congregation in spiritual, or, the other members of the spiritual community if it's not a church situation. But true leadership comes out of modeling what the spiritual community stands for. And my guess is if your spiritual community is similar to mine, it stands for love, compassion, acceptance, and balance. Balance in the giving and the receiving. Balance in being of service and being served. On the planes, when you're on an airplane and there's no oxygen, they tell you that when the masks drop, you put your own mask on first. Then you put the mask on for those that are with you to serve them. And that way you don't black out. In spiritual community, you don't burn out when you make sure that you're being nurtured as well as nurturing. And so what spiritual community means to you, what you go to receive from spiritual community and give to spiritual community, happens best from a place of balance. And that's what we came to in our conversation this week. Now, you might have some questions about this, so I hope you'll take the time to contact me either through Facebook private messaging or writing on my Facebook page, or you can text me at 828-318-3389, or you can email me at cliff@yanavcsl.org. Feel free to contact me any way you like. If you have any questions or thoughts or comments, I surely would love to hear from you around this. And please join us next week, next Wednesday at noon. We're there every Wednesday at noon and 5:30 Pacific time, having these very deep and rich conversations. I hope you'll join us. See you then.